Hello, and welcome to Wendy's Weird World. Today's story is titled Life Changes Too Quickly, and it's about a young woman of partial Cherokee Native American heritage who finds out how true this title is. As a disclaimer, I would like to be clear that I am not of Cherokee heritage, nor do I speak for those who are. I chose that heritage for the main character out of deep respect for Native Americans and their relationship with nature. Also, I happen to live a couple hours from the lovely Cherokee, North Carolina. This is a fantasy tale, and I hope everyone can enjoy it. But if you think this fact may trigger you in some way, please feel free to skip this story, and I look forward to telling you a different story next time. And now, on with the story. Life changes too quickly. Tsula sat on her bed in her small apartment, staring at the box of chicken nuggets she'd impulsively picked up. Her mother's voice echoed in her head in a disapproving and stern tone. "We don't eat animals, Tsula. It's not who we are." But Tsula was tired of rules, tired of being her mother's puppet. She had spent her whole life following her orders without even knowing why. Vegan, disciplined, and perfect. Yet here she was, now about to graduate college with her master's and living life on her own. She'd been curious about meat for a while now, and today, she was finally going to try it. She plucked one of the nuggets from the box, feeling a strange thrill of rebellion. The first bite tasted fine. Salty, savory, and a little greasy. Really, not all that different from the vegan ones she had tried from the freezer section at the grocery store. By the time she'd finished eating her nuggets, she felt oddly proud of herself, as though she had conquered some invisible barrier between her and freedom. That pride soon faded as her stomach churned. Hours later, she lay in bed, sweat beading on her forehead, her body protesting the unfamiliar food. "Must be the meat," she thought, groaning as nausea twisted her insides. Eventually, sleep overtook her, but it was not restful. Feverish dreams carried her into a strange, mist-covered field. She could feel her feet sinking into the soft earth, and the air around her was thick with the scent of rain and soil. She saw two women approaching, one older, her wise eyes full of warmth, and another younger, but just as familiar. "Tsula," the old woman said. Her voice was both soothing and like the rustle of leaves in a deep forest. "It's time for you to learn the truth." "Grandmother?" Tsula asked, recognizing her from old family photos. She was even named after her. The younger woman stood behind her great-grandmother, Tsula realized, though she had never met her. "You must seek forgiveness, child," the elder Tsula said. Her voice was gentle but firm. Tsula blinked in confusion. "Forgiveness? For what?" "For the life you took," the great-grandmother answered, stepping forward. "Even though you didn't know it, the animal you consumed gave you a gift. You must honor that." "A gift?" Tsula thought back to the chicken nuggets she'd eaten, feeling a wave of nausea again. The idea seemed absurd, but in this dreamlike state, it somehow made sense. Without explanation, the landscape around her shifted, and Tsula found herself standing in a field where a lone chicken pecked at the ground. She approached cautiously, feeling an odd sense of shame. "I'm sorry," Tsula whispered, crouching beside the bird. "I didn't realize. I didn't mean to take your life." The chicken paused its pecking and lifted its head, looking at her with sharp, knowing eyes. For a moment, nothing happened. But then, with a squawk, the bird flapped its wings and hopped onto Tsula's shoulder, its beak hovering near her ear. "You are forgiven," it clucked softly, startling her. "But you must know, you have the ability to join us. Try it." "Join you?" Tsula asked, confused. "What do you mean?" The chicken fluttered down to the ground and flapped its wings once more. "Flap your wings, child. Scratch the earth." Tsula hesitated, feeling foolish. Flap her wings? She wasn't a bird. But something in the chicken's voice compelled her. Slowly, she lifted her arms and mimicked the flapping motion. She began to scratch the dirt with her feet, just as the chicken had instructed. As she moved, a strange feeling came over her, like the world was shifting around her again. Was the ground rising, or was she shrinking? She glanced down in amazement as her fingers morphed into feathers, her arms transforming into wings. She clucked in surprise, and her vision changed, shrinking her to the same height as the chicken in front of her. The chicken cackled, and Tsula found herself laughing too, except her laughter came out in squawks. Her body had completely transformed. She was now a chicken, standing side by side with the bird she had just apologized to. "Tsula," a familiar voice beckoned. She looked up to see her grandmother approaching, this time with a fond smile on her face. "My darling, your mother never told you the truth about who you are. You come from a long line of shapeshifters, and our name, Tsula, means fox. Not only are we clever, but we take the form of animals when we are blessed by their spirits." Tsula clucked in disbelief, fluttering her wings anxiously. Her grandmother reached down, lifting her gently. "Your mother tried to protect you from this life, from the danger that follows us. She feared you would be hunted, just as I was, just as your ancestors were. But you have the gift, Tsula, and it's time you learned how to use it." Tsula squawked, her confusion turning to determination as she felt the deeper connection to the spirit world forming within her. "You've taken your first step," her grandmother said, stroking her feathers. "Now, you must learn how to shift freely and to embrace all that you are." Tsula woke with a start, her breath catching in her throat as she bolted upright in bed. She blinked rapidly, trying to make sense of her surroundings. Her hands were trembling, her heart was pounding in her chest. Slowly, she unclenched her fists. Thankfully, human hands. Her fever had broken, but her body still felt warm, like the energy from the dream hadn't completely left her. Then, her eyes fell on something strange nestled in the sheets beside her. A small, smooth egg. Her pulse quickened, and she stared at the egg in disbelief. It was real, solid and warm to the touch. But how? The dream, she realized, it hadn't just been a dream. Tsula had actually transformed into a chicken, and this egg was proof. In the quiet morning light, she sat on the edge of her bed, holding the egg in her hand. Her mind was reeling. Shapeshifters. Her mother had always kept secrets, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. Tsula felt an unsettling mixture of wonder and fear. She had to talk to someone. Her mother, Inola. A few days later, Tsula opened the door to her apartment to find her mother, Inola, standing there, Her face was lined with worry. Even before she stepped inside, Tsula could sense something was wrong. Her mother's eyes darted around, scanning the room as though she expected something to leap out of the shadows. "You shouldn't have asked me to come here," Enola said. Her voice was tight. She hugged her daughter briefly. "It's not safe." Tsula frowned, guiding her mother into the small living room. "What are you talking about? Why isn't it safe?" Enola glanced around nervously, then sat down, wringing her hands together. You've been visited, haven't you? In your dreams." Tsula's breath hitched. Her mother knew. "Yes," she whispered. "By grandmother and great-grandmother. They told me what I am. A shapeshifter." Enola closed her eyes, letting out a shaky breath. "I was afraid this would happen." "Mom, why didn't you tell me?" Tsula asked. Her voice was laced with frustration. "Why keep this gift a secret from me my entire life?" Enola's eyes filled with sorrow. "Because, Tsula, this isn't a gift. It's a curse. I wanted to protect you. It's the reason you grew up without a father." "Protect me from what? What about my father?" Tsula demanded, standing her ground. Enola swallowed hard, her voice dropping to a near whisper as a tear escaped her eye and streaked down her cheek. "From the bear. From Mato. Your father protected us. Protected me. But..." At the name, a chill swept through the room. The hairs on Tsula's arms stood on end. All she knew about her father was that he died from a bear attack when she was a toddler, and that he loved her very much. "Mato?" Tsula repeated. "What is that? Who is that?" Enola sighed, her eyes dark with an old, deep-seated fear. "He is the bear, but not just any bear. He's a shifter too, an ancient one and far more powerful than you can imagine. For generations, our family has been hunted by him. He gains strength by consuming other shapeshifters, taking their powers for his own." Tsula felt a lump rise in her throat. "So, why didn't you tell me? Why hide this from me?" Her mother stood up abruptly and started pacing the small room. "Because I didn't want you to live in fear like I did. Your grandmother, your great-grandmother, they lived constantly on the move, hiding from Mato. I thought if I raised you outside this life, without the knowledge of what you are, that he wouldn't find you." Tsula crossed her arms, emotions swirling within her. In a panic, she thought. "But you've led him right to me, haven't you?" Enola stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of her secret had finally crushed her. She looked at Tsula with tear-filled eyes and nodded. "Don't blame me entirely, little fox." She loved using that name endearingly for Tsula. "But it's likely. I saw signs of him near our home, so after you left for college, that is why I sold the house. I've been living on the move, trying to stay hidden. But now, he probably has tracked me to you, especially since you've discovered your abilities. I'm so sorry, Tsula. I thought I had more time." The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock on the wall. The truth hit Tsula like a tidal wave. Her mother had kept her ignorant to protect her, but now, It had placed them both in the path of a dangerous enemy. "We have to run," Enola said. Her voice was desperate. "He'll come for you now, just like he came for me and your grandmother." Tsula shook her head, determination setting in. "I'm not running." Enola's eyes widened. "Tsula, you don't understand. You've never faced anything like this. Mato is relentless. He won't stop until he's devoured your power." But Tsula's resolve only strengthened. "I won't hide from who I am anymore, Mom. We have the power to fight him." Enola looked at her daughter, a mixture of both pride and fear on her face. "You are brave, Tsula, but don't be stupid. Mato is different. He's faster, stronger, and smarter than any shifter I've ever encountered. He's hunted our family for centuries and gains unnatural life and power from each shifter he catches. He particularly dislikes me because my mother and grandmother managed to stay one step ahead of him. I didn't want you to know because the moment you tap into your power, you become a beacon for him." Tsula clenched her fist, her heart racing. "Then we fight him together. Teach me everything you know about shifting." They moved swiftly after that conversation. On the run, Tsula learned how to connect with the spirits of animals by collecting a tuft of fur, lost feathers, or scales. She kept what she collected in a jar in her backpack and was able to use some of Enola's tokens to connect to other animals. They even collected a few interesting tokens from the zoo, and of course pet stores and shelters had a great variety. Her mother made certain to teach her how to shift into the form of the black fox, which their family was known for. Swift, cunning, and elusive. Tsula found she preferred the form of the lovely fiery red fox instead. Tsula learned how to control her transformations more fluently, shifting into many different animals, always careful to respect the spirits of the animals she connected with. In no time, her skills were equal to those of Enola, who was impressed at the talent that her daughter possessed. Whether on land, in the trees, in the air, or even in water, Tsula moved swiftly and gracefully as though her life depended on it, which it did. They didn't have long before Mato found them. It was in the dead of the night during one of the many moves from town to town. Tsula had just settled into a small rented cabin when her mom's alarmed voice woke her from sleep. "He's here," Enola whispered. Her voice was barely a breath. "Mato." Tsula felt her blood run cold at the sound of the name. The forest around their cabin was silent, but there was a presence, a darkness that seemed to creep from all sides. Without a word, Tsula shifted, her body rippling into the form of a sleek, fiery red fox, while her mother turned into a black fox beside her. Together they bolted from the cabin, racing into the thick woods beyond. Behind them, a massive shadow moved through the trees. Mato. He was in his bear form, but even in the darkness, Tsula could sense his hunger, his raw power as he pursued them, crashing through the underbrush with terrifying speed. They darted through the forest. Tsula's heart was pounding in her chest, but Mato was gaining. In a blur, Tsula shifted mid-run into a squirrel running up into the trees. Her mother followed right behind her. Mato didn't miss a beat, and in the blink of an eye, he was a golden-eyed jaguar climbing the tree right behind them. While leaping from one branch of the tree to another, Tsula transformed into a small bird, soaring higher into the trees. Her mother shifted into a hawk, wings beating as they flew together through the dense canopy. But Mato shifted again. He morphed this time into a monkey, swinging higher into the trees after them and gaining on them. He then shifted into a lemur again to get more speed, closing more distance between them. Then he took to the air as a condor. Each transformation was faster than the last. He was relentless, but always one step behind, driven by hunger for their power. Tsula could feel the tension in the air. The chase was reaching its breaking point. Her mother had taught her to stay calm, to be clever, but the relentless energy of Mato was overpowering. She gave her mother a fast nod and went into a dive, fast and away from Mato, fluttering her wings and flying close to the ground as she again became a fox, slipping into the underbrush with her mother right behind. The condor was too large to be able to pull off the dive, and so Mato shifted again, this time into something unnatural. His desperation to keep up with them, to outmaneuver their clever transformations, had made him reckless. His concentration faltered. Instead of forming a sleek, agile creature, his body contorted, limbs twisting in on themselves. He let out a growl, but it was no longer the roar of a powerful predator. It was a guttural, mangled sound. Tsula peeked out into the clearing, her mother beside her. Together they watched as Mato's body morphed into this grotesque, malformed creature, his flesh writhing as he struggled to maintain control. The powerful shifter who had hunted them for so long was now collapsing under the weight of his own greed. He flopped onto the ground, gasping his final breath, his body twitching. In an instant, his great power was extinguished. Mato was no more. Tsula stood there, still in the form of a fox, staring at the lifeless figure of the shapeshifter that had terrorized her family for generations. Her mother shifted beside her, once again human, and placed a hand on her daughter's fur. "You did it," Enola whispered. Her voice was full of awe. "We did it." Tsula shifted back. Her breath was heavy as she stood, blinking in disbelief. Mato, the great hunter, had destroyed himself in his own desperation for power. She hadn't needed to fight him with violence. They had won by staying true to who they are, shapeshifters who embraced the balance of nature. Two silver foxes appeared out of the bushes nearby and walked up to look at the misshapen body of Mato. They looked up at the women, gave a wink, and gracefully disappeared back into the bushes of the forest. Tsula looked at her mother. They both knew those were no ordinary foxes. The family curse was broken, and it could be embraced as the gift it was intended to be. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, Tsula turned to her mother and smiled. They were free. Thank you so much for joining me for this adventurous tale. As always, if you like the story, please hit the like button for me. If you haven't subscribed yet, I hope you do. Use the notification bell to set up your preferences. These things can really help out the channel. Feel free to share this with anyone you think might enjoy hearing these stories. I also wanted to take a moment to say thank you to everyone helping with the relief efforts from the storm Helene, which came through a large portion of the southeastern United States. Many of my stories are set in South Carolina, which is my home. We are grateful to all first responders, linemen, and anyone who offered any help in any form. Thank you. Until next time, be well, be happy, and stay safe. After all, it's a weird world.